Well. We've got to get rid of that sound. Apologies. We got feedback going all over the place here. We'll get rid of that. And thank you so much for joining us. My name is Bob France, not the great Dennis Prager. Dennis is off today, and I appreciate you being here with us. And I'm going to have to get rid of that audio, too. We're hearing all kinds of feedback all over the place here on the on this end of the tin cans today. 6 minutes after the top of the hour, again, Bob France, I am coming to you live from the PainFreeReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420 The Answer in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm still not quite sure where this audio is coming from that we are hearing, so we're going to have to kill that. Yeah, I think it is. There it is. Now it's gone. Yeah, we try to Skype the show to you if you are watching it on the website, on Dennis Prager's website, or in any of your local Salem sites, and sometimes the audio feedback interrupts and does not cooperate with us, and that was happening just now. So we're going to kill the Skype feed for now, but if you do want to watch the show, we'll get that repaired sooner rather than later. And believe me, you're going to want to be a part of today's show. I just learned within the last half hour that the city of Louisville, which is essentially being held hostage right now. I mean, the city of Louisville is on lockdown, not Chinese coronavirus lockdown, not preventative measures because of the spread of the pandemic virus. No. It's being held hostage, and it is on lockdown because of fears of rioting when the grand jury announces its decision on whether or not they're going to charge the police officers responsible in the shooting of Breonna Taylor from this past spring. They ordered these extreme measures to be taken 2 days ago, actually, because they just weren't sure when the grand jury, was going to make their announcement on whether or not charges would be filed against the police officers. There has been a movement to bring charges in the death of Breonna Taylor now ever since it happened. Hers is one of the names that has been plastered on jerseys or helmets or other professional sports uniforms. Say her name. She is being given, essentially, she's being, treated as just another one of the African-American victims of police brutality and of police excessive force, et cetera, et cetera. Tragic story, of course, the story of Breonna Taylor. Terrible story. You know the story by now. Police were serving a no-knock warrant. They tried to go into the residence of Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, as it turns out, who was wanted on a number of crimes, with a warrant for a number of crimes. And he shot through the door at the police officers and struck a police officer. Police officers returned fire, striking, sadly and horrifically and tragically, Breonna Taylor. And this, of course, is just pointed to as another example of police not caring about minorities and, the whole nine yards as to where we are. So Monday, police announced that they had canceled all vacations and off days for police officers in Louisville. They were setting up barricades. They are boarding up windows. They are preparing for a riot, because they don't know what the grand jury is going to say. And if the grand jury determines that the police officers did act appropriately, especially when fired upon, and the fact that Breonna Taylor was shot 8 times is a tragedy but not a crime committed by these officers, they expect this to be Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland, Oakland, Atlanta, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Should I go on? They are expecting an all-out riot on behalf of the Black Lives Matter, Inc. organization. Antifa is probably mobilizing. They probably already have their pallets of bricks on standby and are ready to go. And so Louisville, I can't imagine being a resident in that state right now. If you are in that city right now, if you are in Louisville, Kentucky right now, and perhaps you're listening on WGTK 970 AM, The Answer, I feel for you. I don't know what you can expect this afternoon, but the word is that the grand jury decision is coming down this afternoon. That could mean now. That could mean at 5 o'clock. I don't know. But if you are living in Louisville and you're listening on The Answer, 970 The Answer there, I'm going to welcome your calls first and foremost today on the Dennis Prager Show, because I want to know what you're feeling. I want to know what your expectations are. And I want to know whether or not you believe that what is being done to your city preemptively is necessary. Should we always expect the worst, or would it be irresponsible to not expect the worst? Maybe this is the right thing for the police to do and the city to do, to put everybody on notice, to tell everybody you're going to have to shelter in place. There's not a dangerous virus that's coming your way. There is a dangerous violence that is coming your way. I would like to know how you feel about that. 8 Prager 776 877-243-7776. We will, of course, take calls from all over the country, but I really want to know how you feel in Louisville, Kentucky. This is the breaking news story of the hour. It just crossed my screen, as I said, about 30 minutes ago, that the grand jury decision is expected this afternoon. So it could happen while we're on the air, and I would like to know how you feel about preparing to be in a war zone. And that's literally what it is. Now, we're going to tie that, since that is the breaking news of the day and of the hour, but the breaking news or the ongoing news cycle surrounding the replacement of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. That is, of course, the news of the week, news of the month, maybe the news of the year, certainly the news of the election cycle. And it ties directly into this news of the day. Preparing for riots. Preparing for businesses to be destroyed in the name of what? Justice? Is that what it is? I'm asking legitimately. We have to board up the businesses as if a hurricane is going to hit. Those on the East Coast or in the Gulf Coast, they board up windows whenever the weather turns surly and there are tropical depressions out there in the Gulf or out there in the Atlantic, and we know we got to board it up. Here it comes. We can't avoid it. That's how Louisville, Kentucky is forced to treat the wave of violence that is coming. You ought to be able to avoid that. But they're boarding up windows as if Hurricane Breonna, or hurricane in the name of Breonna Taylor, the tragic victim in that terrible shooting, which indeed is a tragedy but may not be a crime. They're acting as if this is unstoppable. It's inevitable. The wave of violence is coming, and that's a problem, particularly when it is Democrat politicians and leaders in so many of the cities that I just named for you that refuse to call for an end to the violence, that which is already happening, that which is already has been going on for what? 110, 120 days now straight in Portland and Seattle, and to an extent in Minneapolis, some of those other cities I just mentioned. They don't call for an end to it. They'll make occasional generality statements. Well, we condemn all violence. No, call them out. Specifically, call out Antifa. Call out Black Lives Matter, Inc. Call out the Revolutionary Communist Party USA. They are the ones trashing and destroying cities, destroying businesses, destroying careers, destroying lives. And they won't call them out. So, as I was saying, we'll tie this together with the replacement of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court of the United States, because the left is threatening to bring more violence, just like the ones in the cities I mentioned, and just like that which Louisville, Kentucky is bracing for right now, if Donald Trump does the unthinkable. And the unthinkable is his job. It's his constitutional obligation to name a replacement to replace Justice Ginsburg, and if he does so, there is more violence coming. The left has guaranteed it. We're going to discuss it. We're going to get in depth on it. Want you to be a part of it. My name is Bob France. I'm very honored to be sitting in for the great Dennis Prager. If you're trying to watch the show on your computer screen, we'll try to get the Skype fixed shortly. But thanks for being with us here on the Dennis Prager Show.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
If you want to check this out, there's Anderson Cooper. They're going to a break, and they go to a wide shot, and the segment is over. They're 6 or 8, 10 feet apart, whatever they are, and then they go to a break, and then they immediately go right to each other, and Biden leans in and is whispering in Anderson Cooper's ear. Let's play this video.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more questions from our audience for former Vice President Joe Biden. Thanks.
There they are. They go to this big wide shot. They're both scanning each other. Biden and Cooper start going toward, and there it is. Joe Biden literally leaning into Joe Biden's ear and whispering in his ear. Now, again, not trying to be a jerk here, not trying to be the male version of Karen. They're not socially distancing. Why don't they social distance? Oh, you mean maybe they thought the cameras were off? So they're like in different zip codes when they're on camera, but when they think they're in a break, Biden literally walks up and they both lean into each other, and there's Joe Biden whispering in Anderson Cooper's ear. What do you make of that? What do you make of that? 1-800-655-MIKE. I'm serious. Tell me a little bit about what goes through your mind when you see that what appears to be a crack in the armor of those who are convinced that you better slap a mask on, you better stay home, you better not go out, you better not live your life. This is like Crazyville.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Another one. But I have to read to you from the competition across town, the Washington Post yesterday. Quote, two recent polls show Biden and Trump running about even among Latino voters in Florida, while Clinton outpaced Trump by 27 points with the group 4 years ago. Now, that's the Washington Post citing two polls. Then they said Democratic Party officials are worried about Latino votes in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. This may be the story no one was aware of until this week, and all of a sudden the president shows up in Nevada, does Latino roundtable in Nevada, in Arizona, and in California. David, I think we're on to something here.
Well, look, the president's competing hard for the Latino vote. I wrote about this maybe 10 days ago. They've been sort of enmeshed in these communities for a long time. I think to properly understand the competition for these votes is to understand that not all Latinos or Hispanics are the same. Out west, you've got Hispanics, Latinos of Mexican descent, and they're going to be more liberal than Americans of Cuban descent. And I spent some time in South Florida in 2019 talking to Cuban Americans. And, the president, from a policy perspective and a personality perspective, is a really good fit for the Cuban American vote. They kind of look at him as somebody who walks and talks like they do. Where the president is going to have a challenge is the increasingly large, and it is already large, population of Americans from Puerto Rico and Americans of Puerto Rican descent around Orlando.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
As I mentioned, Ruth Bader Ginsburg
That is certainly an appropriate reminder right now as we started the show trying to provide you with that Town Hall TV feed and had a little bit of a struggle with the Skype, but we are good now. And thanks so much for being with us. My name is Bob France, sitting in for Dennis, live here in the ReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420 The Answer in Cleveland, Ohio. You know, I saw a story yesterday that is very discouraging and distressing to me that I would imagine is to you as well. The state of Wisconsin has ruled that mail-in ballots, not talking about the certified absentee ballots that you request and that are sent to you and that have your name on them and you provide your signature and so on and so forth, and they are treated in the same way as you would be voting in person. But we're talking about, of course, the controversial mail-in balloting. The state of Wisconsin ruled that mail-in ballots will continue to be counted without definitive postmarks. In other words, you don't have to have it sent in by the designated deadline. If the postmark is smudged, faded, or in any other way not definitive, it is going to be counted. And this is distressing for some obvious reasons. My fear, like that of many other people, is that President Trump is going to win, and perhaps win decisively. I won't say landslide, but decisively on November 3rd. The silent majority will come forth, and they will be heard, and their votes will be many. And he will win on November 3rd, and we'll begin to celebrate. And the fear is that in the coming days and weeks, there are going to be all kinds of newfound ballots, postmarked before the election, or not postmarked at all, can't read it, so we're going to err on the side of let's count it. And one by one, Trump won states are going to be peeled off. And the electoral margin gets a little closer, and then a little closer, and then suddenly he's below 270. We thought we had a second term for President Trump, but we don't. And we have to wait and see what the rest of the mail-in counting looks like. It's going to be Florida from 2000 on steroids. I kind of bring that up just to remind you of something that's very important to all of us, and that is getting this vote out in person, turning out the numbers. This is what it's all about. I know Dennis talks to you about the Keep America America campaign, and the key is indeed going to be turnout. They've got their vote machine, and it could extend well past the election with this mail-in voting and with all of the fraud that is possible. Early voting, mail-in voting, you name it. If you want to keep America America, then join Job Creators Network and get out the vote. Go to keepamericaamerica.com. Get registered, find your local polling place and who's on your ballot, and get voting deadlines, policy updates, the vote by mail info, and more. Get involved. Get your conservative family and friends involved too. Go to keepamericaamerica.com. Become part of the biggest get out the vote effort in conservative history. We have a country to save. Do a little, do a lot, but do something. Go to keepamericaamerica.com now. That's keepamericaamerica.com. And my goal here, friends, is to win so decisively on November 3rd, win so emphatically that any amount of chicanery that they do with mail-in vote counts after the election are going to be irrelevant. You've got to turn out. All right, phone number is 8Prager776. That's 877-243-7776. I started the show by telling you that we are awaiting the grand jury decision on the police officers who were responsible in the shooting, the tragic shooting of Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. That grand jury decision is coming down sometime this afternoon. We just don't know when. And they have the entire city boarded up and preparing for violence, a wave of violence that you can't really even imagine. And I'm asking Louisville residents to call and tell us what's going on down there. So we're going to start out with Sharon, who is in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you for listening to the Dennis Prager Show. Sharon, it's Bob. Go right ahead.
Hi, Bob. Thank you so much for taking my phone call. I really appreciate it.
Certainly.
First, I want to say I have been a lifelong Democrat, and then watching what our mayor and local government, how they have mistreated and abused our law enforcement has completely flipped me and my entire family. We are now loyal Republicans and will be voting for Donald Trump in person with our IDs on Election Day. My nephew is an LMPD officer, and it is absolutely awful in this city. Our downtown is completely shut down. Every building that you can imagine is boarded up. They have sprayed all the buildings with fire retardant. And since downtown is shut down, now they're expecting the protesters to head to the suburbs, especially the affluent part of the suburbs in the east end of Louisville. Our businesses, my employer is sending people home early because we're scared. We're really scared of the violence. It is bad in the city, and it's only getting worse. And our local Democratic leaders are doing nothing. They are cowards. And we, as citizens, cannot wait until our next election, our mayoral election, because we are going to turn out and we are going to vote these clowns out of office. Anybody that's listening, please pray for our city. Our city was beautiful. We were a community, and it is being absolutely destroyed by the leftists and the liberals. And I will vote Republican for the rest of my life. I swear.
Sharon,
Donald Trump,
I'm so glad that you called. I can hear the passion and I can hear the anguish in your voice, and I don't blame you at all. You should be anguished. You should be concerned and upset the fact that your city. Think about what she just said. She just said they had to spray fire retardant chemicals on buildings throughout downtown Louisville, Kentucky. They have businesses boarded up to protect the windows from being smashed. They are expecting humanity at its worst, and they have every right to, because humanity has proven that if you are upset anymore in America, if something displeases you, if an election doesn't go your way, if a law doesn't go your way, and you are a leftist, your only recourse is to smash and destroy. Destroy businesses, destroy employees' jobs, destroy business owners' careers, their lives. Smash, burn, destroy, put people in harm's way, assault, block traffic, pull people out of cars. This is what they're expecting because this is what has been done. And what Sharon just said in Louisville is exactly right. The leadership won't do anything. The leadership won't say anything. Now, I can't say specifically. I'm told that the mayor and the chief of police were speaking moments ago on Fox, or at least in a press conference perhaps that Fox was carrying, and I couldn't hear it. But the bottom line is, I don't know what they're saying, but unless they're saying we will arrest anybody and everybody, we will have paddy wagons by the scores downtown. We will have our officers ready to go in riot gear for their protection, and anybody that smashes, anybody that does anything other than march and hold up a sign and sing or chant, anybody that does anything physically violent or with any vandalism will be arrested, and you will not be set out with no bail. We'll have more coming up on the Dennis Prager Show.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Cincinnati, Ohio, evidently the other day had thousands of cars in a big Trump parade. I saw with my own eyes over in Madeira Beach, Florida, thousands of boats. They've been in South Carolina, North Carolina. I mean, up there, Hartwell. All these big thousands of people turning out to support President Trump. I kid you not. You got to go online quickly to MikeOnline.com. Click Watch Mike on TV so you can see the video I'm going to play of the Biden car parade. If I told you there were 3 with beeping horns, 3 cars with Biden for president signs on the side, would you believe me? Okay, check it out. MikeOnline.com. This is the thrill, the excitement, the energy of the Biden for president campaign. It's one car, somebody in a mask on a convertible waving a flag. Everybody's got masks. course. Second car. There's Jill waving at the second car. And there's the third car. That's it. 3 cars.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Look, Joe Rogan got the most listened to podcast in America. Joe Rogan bluntly put it this way yesterday, cut number 17.
I'd also vote for Whoopi Goldberg over Joe Biden. I'd vote for Mike Tyson over Joe Biden. I just don't think it's a good idea to take someone who's struggling with dementia and put him in one of the most stressful positions the world has ever known. I don't know why the Democrats thought it would be a good idea to take someone who's clearly got a problem.
Yeah, this is Joe Rogan. Now, for those of you who don't know who Joe Rogan is, you're probably over 70. Would someone look up the stats on how far Adam Carolla and Joe Rogan are the most listened to people in America on demand? They have the largest podcast in America. Now, I am one of the top 5 radio talk show hosts in America. We have a different format, right? I give you news, weather, traffic, sports, wherever you are, as well as breaking news. Joe Rogan just talks to you and does the Joe Rogan thing. There's some other great podcasts, Barstool Sports. There's lots of great stuff out there, and people are listening on demand. But I'm not worried. Talk radio is here forever, and I'm glad to welcome new people into the arena. But Joe Rogan is perhaps a little blunt, right? Maybe I'm a little too diplomatic for Joe. I've talked about the former vice president losing not a step, but a lap. Joe Rogan, I don't know that the vice president has dementia. I don't know that. Joe Rogan doesn't know that. All I know is that he's clueless sometimes.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Fast forward to July 24th, 2019. Mueller testifies before the House and the Senate. He has issued his report, failed to find collusion. Democrats are not really willing to accept his verdict and just give up. They still want to impeach the president based on Russia.
Okay, 34 minutes past the hour. Thanks again for joining us on the Dennis Prager Show. My name is Bob France. Glad to be with you on this Wednesday. Yeah, we're waiting, and we are waiting with bated breath, and not for something good. We're waiting to see what happens if the result of the grand jury's deliberations does not result in charges being filed against Louisville, Kentucky police officers. That's right. The Breonna Taylor case is supposed to come to a head today, at least at this stage, with a grand jury decision expected literally within hours, sometime this afternoon. Louisville's mayor and police chief are talking to the press. They have declared a state of emergency, and they have the entire city basically on lockdown, boarded up, preparing for the worst, because, of course, that's what you do if you hear something you don't like, is you vandalize and destroy other people's property. In the meantime, before I go back to your phone calls, particularly from Louisville, the police officer who was shot by Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, that precipitated the firing from the police officers themselves through the door and into the apartment that struck Breonna Taylor and killed her. That officer, Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly, is speaking out. And he's very, very frustrated, and he's very, very angry at the heat that the police are taking because of this incident, which he said is no fault of their own. He feels terrible, does Officer Sergeant Mattingly, about this, he says, because his fellow officers have to deal with something that they should not. He sent an email that has gone viral, and I'm going to read portions of it to you to kind of set the scene from that vantage point. LMPD family. I'm not here to give you a rah-rah, or excuse me, I'm not here to give you a rah-rah you got this speech. I apologize. There's no punctuation in this, or little. I'm not here to give you a rah-rah you got this speech. I'm not here to tell you that you signed up to help this community and to keep your head up. I'm here to tell you I'm sorry you have to go through all of this. I'm sorry your families have to go through this. I'm sorry the mayor, Amy Hess, and Chief Conrad failed all of us in epic proportions for their own gain and to cover their arses. I'm being colloquial. You do not deserve to be in this position, he writes, the position that allows thugs to get in your face and yell and curse and degrade you, to throw bricks, bottles, and urine on you, and expect you to do nothing. It goes against everything we were all taught at the academy. The position that if you make a mistake during one of the most stressful times in your career, the department and the FBI, who aren't cops and would urinate their own pants if they had to hold the line, go after you for civil rights violations, your civil rights mean nothing, but the criminal has total autonomy. We all signed up to be police officers. We knew the risks and were willing to take them. But we always assumed the city had your back. We wanted to do the right thing in the midst of an evil world, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to enforce laws that make it possible to live in a peaceful society. We as police do not care if you are black, white, Hispanic, Asian, what you identify as, this week. We aren't better than anyone. This is not an us against society, but it is good versus evil. We are sons, daughters, husbands, wives, partners, brothers, sisters, dads, moms. We are human beings with flaws, feelings, and emotions. Now I'm just rambling, but I want you to know that I'm still proud to be a cop, to be an LMPD cop. No matter the ineptitude in upper command or the mayor's office, this is one of the greatest jobs on earth. With that being said, these next few days are going to be tough. They are going to be long. They're going to be frustrating. They will put a tremendous amount of stress on your families. Do not let your ego get you into a trick bag. Have your partners six. De-escalate if possible. Do not give the pencil pushers at the top, you know, the ones who are too scared to hold the line, a reason to open investigations on you. The same ones that couldn't make decisions to save their lives. We need leaders that lead from the front, not from a room under a desk. Do what you need to do to go home to your family. Just do it with dignity and make sure you can justify your actions, because everything down there is recorded. I don't know a lot of you guys and gals, but I have felt the love. Regardless of the outcome today or Wednesday, that of course was written yesterday, I know we did the legal, moral, and ethical thing that night. It's sad how the good guys are demonized and criminals are canonized. Put that aside for a while. Just keep your focus and do your jobs that you are trained and capable of doing. Don't put up with their blank and go home to these lovely families and relationships. I wish I were there with you leading the charge. I'll be praying for your safety. Remember, you are just a pawn in the mayor's political game. I am proof they do not care about you or your family, and you are replaceable. Stay safe and do the right thing. You are loved and supported by most of the community. Now go be the warriors you are, but please be safe. None of these peaceful protesters are worth your career or freedom. Godspeed, boys and girls. Sergeant John Mattingly, Louisville Police. We'll be right back.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
One of our guests, a very godly man, said that the situation is so dire that it's not just prayers that are needed, but somebody like the president, an American leader, has to officiate over some kind of spiritual rededication of the nation. Do you think things are so dire that we have to have a rededication of this nation to its founding principles?
Yes, and I say that kind of with a hesitant voice. There needs to be not only a rededication, but there needs to be a confession of our sins as a nation, and a turning from those sins, and a turning from sins and turning to God. And I believe when we do that, God might just hear from heaven and possibly heal our country. Our country needs a spiritual healing. And maybe God will use this prayer march to be a seed for that, a beginning for that. I don't know. But I just felt in my heart this is something that I should do. and others. There'll be many thousands of us who will join together, and we will be united, praying for our country, and I hope everyone who lives within a day's drive will just take that Saturday and come and join me, and let's shake that city of Washington for God and for His glory and for His Son Jesus Christ.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
That the 2016 election was the first that we know of, I guess. You had both major party candidates under investigation by the FBI. Now, you might ask yourself, well, gee, the candidates were really bad. Maybe they were all bad people. No, I think what happened was the FBI should not have been involved in politics to the degree that they were. And the book starts out, it's really the road to the Mueller investigation in the first chapter, and it's about James Comey. And in the transition, this is after Donald Trump has won the presidency, in the transition, a lot of his most trusted people around him are strongly urging him to fire James Comey immediately. Rudy Giuliani said, he's going to turn on you. There's something wrong with this guy. And Chris Christie said, he's a loose cannon. And if you keep him after you become president, he'll become your loose cannon. These people were not offended on behalf of Hillary Clinton in the way that Comey handled the Clinton email case. But they thought it was erratic, they thought it was unprofessional, and they thought it would be a prediction of the kind of stuff that would happen if Comey remained FBI director after Trump was president. Trump did not take their advice in what I think everybody could probably say was a mistake. He brought with him to the White House habits that he had used in decades in business. And one of those habits of mine was that he can bring people around. He can win them over. He can talk to them and with the sheer force of his personality, bring them over to his side. And he thought he could do that with Comey. And I think we can all agree that that was a failure.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
How many times a day do you ask yourself, am I going crazy? I had that moment last night when I turned on CNN for about 2 or 3 torturous minutes, and I saw
I will tell you that is one of my favorite videos thus far on Prager University. What you just heard Dennis talking about there, that is a phenomenal video. She is a native of Cameroon in West Africa, came to this country, and cannot believe that the people here think that America is a racist nation where people of color don't have opportunity. She has lived it firsthand in Africa, and she has a great story to tell on PragerU. Welcome once again. 16 minutes before the top of the hour, Bob France sitting in for Dennis Prager. We are monitoring very closely the situation in Louisville, Kentucky, as the grand jury is going to be returning its verdict, if you will, whether or not charges will be filed against the Louisville police officers that shot Breonna Taylor in that terrible event this past March. Now, a little bit earlier, the mayor of Louisville, Kentucky, Greg Fisher, was addressing the local media, talking about preparations for the announcement of that grand jury decision and the potential violence that could result from it. We want you to listen to that now.
Including Metro Hall and City Hall, will be closed the rest of today and tomorrow. And I'm asking downtown area businesses to allow employees to work remotely as well whenever possible. To provide more detail on our plans, here is LMPD Chief Robert Schroeder. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor Fisher. The past several months have been difficult for our community and for the LMBT police officers who have pledged to serve our public. We as a community need to move forward. Over the past several months, LMPD has been working with the community to improve our policies and procedures to better reflect community expectations. Today's announcement is yet another step moving ahead for this community. Whatever the decision is, our officers are prepared to keep doing what they have been doing continuously since May 28th, protecting the public while also ensuring the constitutional right for people to express their feelings in a lawful and peaceful manner. As Mayor Fisher said, we are prepared for gatherings, including large gatherings, and we have been working to ensure people have a safe space to do so. In addition to the measures the mayor outlined, we have restricted the area immediately adjacent to Jefferson Square Park to vehicular traffic, allowing pedestrian traffic only. We have put barriers in place to enforce those safety limits. There is also no parking and limited vehicle access from Broadway north to Market Street and from 2nd Street to 9th Street. Anyone heading to the park is asked to ride share to cut down on the traffic, but they must also be prepared to walk a few blocks. We are facilitating anyone with ADA concerns with access at 6th and Market Streets, and we are working with residents, business owners, and downtown employees to allow needed access. To get into downtown, you may go to 2nd and Jefferson.
Okay, we're going to
9th and Chestnut.
We're going to jump in here to the remarks made by Chief Robert Schroeder there after the remarks made by Mayor Gregory Fisher in Louisville, Kentucky, because, well, most of us aren't in Louisville, and those specific orders to Louisville residents, of course, are going to be passed along at the local level. I do want to hear from Louisville residents, though, and the phone lines are filled with Louisville, Kentucky, because I want to know how you feel about everything that you are experiencing right now. Your mayor, your chief of police, instead of ordering and demanding that potential criminals not undertake criminal action, they're telling law-abiding citizens to stay home, stay off the streets, don't go out and about. We're going to board up. We're going to use fire retardant or flame retardant chemicals on buildings because we expect criminals to criminalize the city of Louisville when this announcement comes down. I've got a very serious problem with that. I do know they need to be prepared, but not prepared by locking down innocent people, but by warning, indeed threatening, potential criminal bad actors that they will be locked up. You don't lock down innocent people, law-abiding people, you lock up criminals. And I hope they are not just prepared to do what the mayor of Baltimore said a few years ago after the Freddie Gray death. Well, those who wish to destroy, let's give them space to destroy. That is not how a peaceable society is supposed to be run. All right, we're going to go to Missy, who is calling us from Louisville, Kentucky on the Dennis Prager Show. It's Bob France sitting in for Dennis. Missy, go right ahead.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for taking my call. I was calling in to clear up a little confusion. A lot of people have some erroneous ideas about what went down with the Breonna Taylor shooting. 2 years ago, she was dating a known criminal named DeMarcus Glover, a drug dealer with a long rap sheet. And even though she had broken up with him, she was continuing to associate with him to carry him on her phone plan, and he was giving her money every month to cover that. And the apartment she was killed in was her apartment. They had a warrant. She is listed on the warrant because the police thought she had something to do with his criminal activity. The new guy, the guy that actually shot Mattingly, was not a criminal. He was a normal guy who happened to be a concealed carry holder. And so he's sleeping over at his girlfriend's apartment. He hears the door being beaten on. He hears hollering and screaming. He doesn't know that it's the cops, and the neighbors have said that the cops didn't identify themselves. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, they go to bust in the door. He shoots, gets one of them in the leg, and they have returned fire and killed this woman. The most important lesson to take away from this is to be careful who you associate with. She was still hanging out with this guy and associating with him after breaking up with him, and that's what got her killed.
Well, I'll tell you what, Missy, that's a lot of really good information that I have independently confirmed. I shouldn't say independently, but I have done a little bit of research and read a little bit of the local coverage there from the Courier Journal, and much of what Missy just said is the way that it has been reported by multiple sources. Much of that is true. I would be cautious to say that hanging around with the wrong people is what got her killed, because this is a tragic situation, and I don't want to blame the victim. However, the circumstances do need to be reported upon, and I think that was a fairly good summary by Missy. We'll have more coming up right after this on The Dennis Prager Show.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The Democrat Party, as America is still recovering from the largest self-imposed economic shutdown in modern history. Do you know what Nancy's doing with the Democrats? They had a vote yesterday on making sure that certain phrases should not be used to describe the Chinese virus. This is from The Blaze. Chris Pandolfo. The Democrat majority in the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution Thursday night condemning what? The shooting of 2 deputies in Compton, Los Angeles. The $2 billion worth of damage and looting done to America by Democrat voters? No. To condemn the phrase China virus and other terms used to describe COVID-19 as a form of, quote, anti-Asian sentiment. The resolution, introduced by Representative Grace Meng of New York, calls on public officials to condemn and denounce, quote, all forms of anti-Asian sentiment as related to COVID-19. It passed in a mostly party line vote of 243 to 163 with 14 Republicans. Eric, I want the names of those 14 Republicans. We will name and shame them here on America First. 14 Republicans who think it's important to control our use of language.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Cincinnati, Ohio, evidently the other day had thousands of cars in a big Trump parade. I saw with my own eyes over in Madeira Beach, Florida, thousands of boats. They've been in South Carolina, North Carolina, up there, Hartwell. All these big thousands of people turning out to support President Trump. I kid you not. You got to go online quickly to MikeOnline.com. Click Watch Mike on TV so you can see the video I'm going to play of the Biden car parade. If I told you there were 3 with beeping horns, 3 cars with Biden for president signs on the side, would you believe me? Okay, check it out. MikeOnline.com. This
Prager on the Salem Radio Network. We are awaiting the announcement of the grand jury decision in Louisville, Kentucky on the Breonna Taylor shooting. 2 police officers fired 8 shots that struck her and killed her after they were fired upon by a person inside, Kenneth Walker, her boyfriend, as they served a no-knock warrant. Terrible tragedy. Was it criminal? Well, the grand jury is going to decide whether or not it's chargeable. And we're told that the governor of Kentucky is going to be actually making the announcement here as the city of Louisville braces for reaction, which is sadly in 2020 expected to be in the form of violence. We're going to go back to Louisville now and talk to John, who is waiting for us here on the Dennis Prager Show. John, it's Bob France sitting in for Dennis. Thank you for calling. Go right ahead.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for taking my call. That was a powerful message the sergeant had said there shortly ago. Quickly, Grandmaster P came to Louisville armed with all his clan, and he said he was going to burn the courthouse down. So that's one reason we've boarded everything up. He should be put in jail for his statements of saying he's going to come and burn our courthouse down. But I've lived here all my life. It's a beautiful city. We're not a racist city. We do have a problem with black youth killing black youth. It's actually higher per capita than Chicago, but nobody talks about that. But, the city's been boarded up for months ever since the rioting started months ago. Weeds are growing 2 foot tall out of the cracks. There's garbage everywhere, homeless living everywhere. I've never seen anything like it in my life. But, God rest Miss Taylor's soul. I don't want to sit here and smear her name. There are some other facts to that case that put her in harm's way, but I don't need to get into that. One of the officers did make a serious mistake in judgment. He didn't follow the protocol. He was under fire, though. Imagine an officer right next to him just got shot, so the next bullet could have been coming through his head. So he made a misjudgment and fired too many shots, and it didn't quite follow protocol. So he's going to pay a serious price for that. But, the law-abiding citizens of this community, we support our police. We will be here to defend our police if they need it. And we're not going to allow, protesting is fine, but we're not going to allow looting and lawlessness here. We're tired of it. We're sick of it. And most of us are armed in case the police do need us.
And that's prudent and that's wise. If the police need you, and more importantly, if you need the police and they are not available for one reason or another because of what they are being told to do, ordered to do, or how stretched thin they are because of the potential violence. All right, thank you for the call. We are being told now that the announcement is imminent. It is coming in about 33 minutes. The Attorney General of the state of Kentucky is Daniel Cameron. He is going to announce the decision of the grand jury on whether or not to charge the officers at 1:30. So in 32 minutes from now, 1:30 Eastern Time, 10:30 on the West Coast. So that will be coming, and we will have it live for you here on the Dennis Prager Show.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Fast forward to July 24th, 2019. Mueller testifies before the House and the Senate. He has issued his report, failed to find collusion. Democrats are not really willing to accept his verdict and just give up. They still want to impeach the president based on Russia. But they think they'll need a big Watergate-style moment. They'll need a hearing that's televised all around the country and the world, and Robert Mueller will stand up in the House and he'll deliver a damning indictment of Donald Trump. And then the whole country will be in favor of removing the president. So it's a disaster. And the disaster is basically Mueller's performance. He seems confused at times. He seems unable to handle some very basic questions at times.
Excuse me, for the timeline, Byron. I mean, this is after a long investigation.
Exactly.
Which itself, Sean Hannity every night was giving us the same information about these people whom he has hired should not be trusted. Turns out that was correct. Well, now, finally, he turns this thing in. I mean, but it's just an agony for the American people. It goes on and on and on. It's a big nothing, and then they decide to have the hearing.
Right. So Mueller seems to be unable to deal with this. He seems to have suffered some sort of cognitive decline. And the interesting thing is, everybody notices it. Everybody says it. But it wasn't a surprise to the Trump people.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
This is monumentally newsworthy that they have connections, pro-communist China organizations that have been around for 50 years are connected to Black Lives Matters, the founders of Black Lives Matter. Why would a pro-communist China organization have anything to do with a movement that's about justice and stopping police brutality? Can you explain that, Mike Gonzalez?
Well, as you know, because you know this, and you haven't explained it though, which is Alicia Garza and Patrice Cullors and Apal Tometi have Marxist plans for the U.S. They think that capitalism in capitalism, what is capitalism? Capitalism is private ownership, right? I own something which I bought with the sweat of my brow. You want to buy it. We both agree on a price. We both walk away happy. We're so freedom. It's another word for freedom. They think that produces inequality,
exploitation.
Right. So since Marx and Engels, communists have had this big boogaboo with private ownership
of property,
private ownership of property.
Free markets.
Right. They even blame the patriarchal family on this, and the patriarchal family was created for this.
Well, let's just stop here for a second. The Black Lives Matter website states that one of their missions is to target and dismantle the traditional nuclear family.
Right. Right.
Which is straight out of the 70s and 60s, isn't it? I mean, that's Weather Underground, it's SDS, Smash Monogamy. These are old objectives, Mike.
It's even older than that. It goes back to the manifesto. It goes back to Engels.
Right.
Engels had a big thing with the family, which he got from an American anthropologist whose theories on this matter have been debunked.
The family is bad.
Yeah, the family's bad.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
The death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg has now thrown a neutron bomb into an already volatile race. Knowing President Trump, he's going to want to nominate somebody right now. Mitch McConnell earlier also said that in the event that there is a death, he would quickly try to move to replace him or her. There is a death, and I'm assuming now that the White House is doing just that. By the way, according to The Atlantic, days before she died, Ruth Bader Ginsburg dictated a statement to her granddaughter, and it read, and I'm quoting, "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed," end of quote. I'm assuming that new president would not be the same old president we have right now, Donald Trump. So she was hoping beyond hope that her replacement would not take place until after the election, assuming Joe Biden wins. Well, that did not happen. The president controls the White House until at least the third week of January, and Republicans control the Senate at least until January the 3rd. And there are more Republican seats that are being that have to be defended than there are Democrat seats in the House, in the Senate rather, giving the Democrats a lot of confidence that they could ultimately take the Senate. In which case, even more important for President Trump and Mitch McConnell to take advantage of their power right now, nominate and then confirm somebody to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Well, the negative narrative that we keep hearing about America, I mean, you and I both know that the Democratic Party has gone crazy. I think Trump drove them to it, and they are just at lightning speed going leftward, unable to control their own people. What do you think is happening in the mind of somebody like a Nancy Pelosi? Because she may have harbored some of these thoughts about America over the decades, but to see that part of the party take control of the entire party, what do you suppose is going through the mind of an old hand like Nancy Pelosi?
Well, I've known the speaker for a while, and my opinion I could be wrong, is that she doesn't believe in anything. She has no belief system. She wants power. She has power. She wants to keep her power. I think that is true.
Hour number 2 of the Dennis Prager program is underway on this Wednesday, the 23rd day of the 9th month of the year of our Lord 2020. Thanks so much for being with us. My name is Bob France, sitting in for Dennis today from the ReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420 The Answer here in Cleveland, Ohio. And just another reminder or an announcement if you did not hear it. The Attorney General of the state of Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, will be announcing in about 24 minutes the grand jury decision as to whether or not charges will be filed against Louisville, Kentucky police who shot and killed Breonna Taylor as a part of a no-knock warrant service gone bad. That city is bracing for some terrible violence, potentially, if they don't get the answer that they want. So we're going to cover that for you live as quickly as we get the information from the Attorney General. Now, having said that, I want to start this hour with our guest. I want to give you a backdrop before I bring Ian Rowe onto the program. Yesterday, again, we're sitting here in the great state of Ohio, where I am right now, and so is Ian Rowe. And in Ohio, over the course of the summer, I believe it was in June, late June, they adopted a resolution, as many school districts and states and boards of education are doing, to condemn racism. It's fine. And to advance equity and opportunity for everyone. Fine. But specifically it says for BIPOC, which stands for Black Students, Indigenous Students, and Students of Color. The resolution includes language such as, whereas profound disparities between BIPOC students and their white peers exist in all parts of the Ohio education system, and whereas black male students lag far behind their white counterparts in several measures of educational attainment, whereas separate but equal is no longer the law of the land, but systemic inequity in education has relegated millions of children of color to under-resourced, struggling schools, and whereas significant gaps between the performance of black students compared to their white peers exist even in generally resourced schools, resolved, the State Board of Education condemns in the strongest possible terms white supremacy culture and hate speech and hate crimes and violence in the service of hatred. Further resolved, the State Board shall offer training, offer means require, to board members to identify your own implicit biases so that we can perform our duties to the citizens of Ohio without racial bias. And further resolved, that the State Board of Education shall require training for all state employees and contractors working within the Department of Education to identify their own implicit biases so that they can perform their duties to the citizens without unconscious racial bias. That's just part of it, and it has led to a very, very contentious Board of Education, State Board of Education meeting over the course of the last 2 days, and among the public testimony, or among those testifying publicly, was Ian Rowe, who joins us now. Ian is a senior visiting fellow with the Woodson Center, 1776 Unites organization. He spoke during public testimony yesterday, and he's going to preach to us today here on the Dennis Prager Show. Ian, thank you so very much for your time today. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Thank you very much for having me on and for covering this extremely important topic.
I heard rave reviews from many, many people who heard you yesterday testifying before the State Board of Education about this resolution in the state of Ohio. I've given enough background. I want to spend this time listening to you now. And can you tell me what the danger is with this type of approach and what it means for curriculum being pushed, advanced, if not mandated, in districts throughout the state of Ohio?
Well, again, Bob, thank you very much for focusing on this. And let me just start by just giving a very quick background on myself and why this context might be helpful. For the last 10 years, I've run a network of public charter schools, nonprofit network of schools in the heart of the South Bronx and the Lower East Side of Manhattan, primarily low-income communities where kids are primarily black and Hispanic, and whose parents chose our schools because they may have faced racial discrimination in their own lives. They may fear that their kids may face challenges as well, but they know that with a great education, with teachers with high expectations, and a curriculum that is uplifting and tells them stories of how you can achieve over adversity, that with those kinds of ingredients, their kids can achieve and realize the American dream. And the reason I thought it was so important to testify yesterday was that the resolution that was passed was actually signaling a set of principles that are much more related to something called critical race theory than they are around ensuring young people understand how the founding ideals of our country are the very things that they need to embrace to achieve the American dream. And this idea of critical race theory starts with the premise, very much embodied in this resolution, that the entire country is steeped in racism, that racial hatred was the driving force behind the creation of the United States, that anti-black racism is embedded in the DNA of the country. The New York Times launched a project called the 1619 Project a year ago that's now been translated into curriculum that espouses these ideas. It says that the democracy's founding ideals were, quote, false when they were written, that racism is embedded in the DNA, that the nation was founded on a lie. That curriculum is now linked to links to the Ohio State Board of Education page on social studies resources that evidently have been vetted by the state, links to this curriculum, which has been discredited by some of the most well-respected historians in the country. And even over the last few days, the New York Times has been forced to confess, and even the primary author of the 1619 Project, Nicole Hannah-Jones, have been forced to confess that they've actually been slowly deleting and erasing a number of the false claims that have been made, even the very idea that they have claimed for a year that the very founding of the country was the year 1619 and not 1776, linking it to their data that says when the country was formed, when 40 slaves arrived in what was then not even America, but they say that's the true founding. And it's this kind of relentless focus on America is a country of the oppressors and the permanently oppressed. It permanently places white people in this evil, villain-taking position, and black people as these helpless victims. And as someone who has run schools in the heart of low-income communities, the very last things a kid of any race needs to hear is that this country is built on permanent racial attitudes and behaviors, and it ignores the millions and millions and millions of people of all races who've embraced our country's founding ideals, who've embraced the idea of hard work, free enterprise, entrepreneurship, faith, strong families. Those are the vehicles that people of all races have embraced in our country to move from persecution to prosperity. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't teach the legacy of slavery in our country, but it's very important to teach the legacy of excellence and resiliency in the face of slavery.
That is very well said, and I want to ask you about the 1776 Unites program, because that's exactly what it seems to me that it is intended to do, and that is to point out the fact that, yes, we have had that dark history of slavery. It's a permanent stain on our national record, but so many people sacrificed so very much to create a free nation that would be the foundation, the building blocks for equality and liberty for all, and that started in 1776. 2 points here, Ian Rowe, and that I'd like you to respond to. One, the president, you mentioned critical race theory. Yesterday, it was reported that President Trump has signed an executive order abolishing critical race theory from being taught or trained in the federal government, the military, and in any federal contractors or organizations. So that's very important. And then the second thing is just an observation when they're taking this message to the schools that tells all young students of color, you are permanent victims. You are victims of a racist society. You're always going to be swimming against the stream because it is systemic, and you should always feel like you're entitled to something more because you're victims. And then you tell all of the children of color, the white kids, it's your fault. You and your light-colored skin, that's the same skin that was worn by people hundreds of years ago who were responsible for slavery. You have systemic racism in your DNA. You are the permanent oppressors of your peers with darker skin in the class. How, Ian, and I'm going to have to ask you to answer this question on the other side of the break, how is that supposed to bring those children together? Or anyone else? We'll be right back.
Okay.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Cincinnati, Ohio, evidently the other day had thousands of cars in a big Trump parade. I saw with my own eyes over in Madeira Beach, Florida, thousands of boats. They've been in South Carolina, North Carolina. Up there, Hartwell. All these big thousands of people turning out to support President Trump. I kid you not. You got to go online quickly to MikeOnline.com. Click Watch Mike on TV so you can see the video I'm going to play of the Biden car parade. If I told you there were 3 with people beeping horns, 3 cars with Biden for president signs on the side, would you believe me? Okay, check it out. MikeOnline.com. This is the thrill, the excitement, the energy of the Biden for president campaign. It's one car, somebody in a mask on a convertible waving a flag. Everybody's got masks, of course. Second car, there's Jill waving at the second car, and there's the third car. That's it. 3 cars.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Joe Rogan, got the most listened to podcast in America. Joe Rogan bluntly put it this way yesterday, cut number 17.
I'd also vote for Whoopi Goldberg over Joe Biden. I'd vote for Mike Tyson over Joe Biden. I just don't think it's a good idea to take someone who's struggling with dementia and put him in one of the most stressful positions the world has ever known. I don't know why the Democrats thought it would be a good idea to take someone who's clearly got a problem.
Yeah, this is Joe Rogan. Now, for those of you who don't know who Joe Rogan is, you're probably over 70. Joe Rogan, would someone look up the stats on how far Adam Carolla and Joe Rogan are the most listened to people in America on demand? They have the largest podcast in America. Now, I am one of the top 5 radio talk show hosts in America. We have a different format, right? I give you news, weather, traffic, sports, wherever you are, as well as breaking news. Joe Rogan just talks to you and does the Joe Rogan thing. There's some other great podcasts, Barstool Sports. There's lots of great stuff out there, and people are listening on demand. But I'm not worried. Talk radio is here forever, and I'm glad to welcome new people into the arena. But Joe Rogan is perhaps a little blunt, right? Maybe I'm a little too diplomatic for Joe. I've talked about the former vice president losing not a step, but a lap. Joe Rogan, I don't know that the vice president has dementia. I don't know that. Joe Rogan doesn't know that. All I know is that he's clueless sometimes.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The the Eric Metaxas Show.
Fast forward to July 24th, 2019. Mueller testifies before the House and the Senate. He has issued his report, failed to find collusion. Democrats are not really willing to accept his verdict and just give up. They still want to impeach the president based on Russia. But they think they'll need a big Watergate-style moment. They'll need a hearing that's televised all around the country and the world, and Robert Mueller will stand up in the House and he'll deliver a damning indictment of Donald Trump. And then the whole country will
jury in Jefferson County in Louisville, Kentucky. They are being read right now by, I believe, the judge. Let's go live to that decision.
Hankerson committed the offense of wanton endangerment in the first degree when, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life, he wantonly shot a gun into an apartment occupied by initials ZF against the peace and dignity of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Mr. Foreperson, is that the decision of the grand jury?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Sir, if you would please randomly select a number.
Division 13.
Division 13. Thank you, sir. The case will then be assigned to Jefferson Circuit Court, Division 13. Madam Assistant Attorney General, do you have a motion with respect to bond?
Yes, Your Honor. The Assistant Attorney General asks for $15,000 full cash bond for the defendant, Brett Hankinson.
I will grant the motion and assign bond in the amount of $15,000 full cash and issue a warrant. That concludes the business of the grand jury sitting for Jefferson County in September 2020. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be excused. I'm going off the record.
All right. We're trying to make as much sense of this breaking news as we can. Officer Brett Hankerson, Hankison, Hankison, has been charged by the grand jury with wanton endangerment in the first degree with a reckless disregard for human life. And I'm just trying to recall the words. We don't have it written. There are 3 counts against him. Now, I heard at the end of that, the same thing that you did, that this concludes the grand jury statement or work or what have you for this month. I did not hear anything referencing Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly, who was struck in the leg by the bullet fired from inside Breonna Taylor's apartment, or Miles Cosgrove. And according to officials, Mattingly, Hankison, and Cosgrove returned fire. We're shooting more than 20 rounds total, Taylor being struck 8 times. So it sounds like, unless there is something that they are going to announce later, that one of the officers is facing charges, none of them rising to the level of manslaughter, much less second or first degree murder. The charge looks like it is wanton endangerment of the first degree, in the first degree, and 2 other charges, but none of them rising to the level of manslaughter. What this means going forward, we will try to find out for you, and what kind of reaction they will have in Louisville, Kentucky, we will keep our eye on as well. They have gone into a state of emergency as of Monday by orders of the mayor and the police. They have pretty much locked the entire city of Louisville down in preparation for possible violence as a result of this grand jury decision. So that's what we have as of right now. And I'm told that we do have our guest. Ian Rowe. Let me bring Ian Rowe back onto the program here. Ian Rowe is our guest, and we're discussing curriculum in the state of Ohio, but this, of course, can be translated to any other state as well as it pertains to the 1619 project and other things. But we had to kind of duck out on Ian for a moment while we got that grand jury announcement, and he is back with us from 1776 Unites and the Woodson Center. Ian, thank you. I apologize for the breakup there, but it's good to have you back there. Are you with us?
Not a problem. That was breaking news, so totally
Yes.
understood.
Yes, and we'll, of course, have to figure out what that breaking news means going forward. But let's finish our conversation to the extent that we can in the short time we have left. Ian, you represent the Woodson Center. I want you to tell us about the Woodson Center and about 1776 Unites. And I want to ask you in the context of two things. Number one, the 1619 project that you referenced earlier. And secondly, a few nights ago, President Trump announced the formation of a 1776 commission. Does that have anything to do with the Woodson Center and 1776 Unites?
Yeah, so thank you. So, yes, I am representing the Woodson Center. So Bob Woodson, about 40 years ago, a leading African-American scholar, created an organization dedicated to helping low-income Americans of all races solve problems really from the bottom up by embracing the principles of strong families, faith, local community organizations to solve problems. It's not that they were saying that the government couldn't help them, but they recognized that they had agency within their own lives. They didn't have to be victims of their own circumstance, and the practice of actually getting up was actually the pathway to move from victimhood to prosperity. And so over the course of 40 years, he's built 10 principles, and those principles are things that you might imagine, like resiliency, optimism, competence, characteristics that once you embrace those principles, give you the ability to escape your circumstance. And when the 1619 Project was launched by the New York Times, that basically said America is doomed to be, it was founded in racism, it is doomed to be racist, it's white supremacy in the DNA, forever painting black people as permanent victims. Bob Woodson had the idea that there had to be a response to this. I mean, some of the most well-regarded historians in the country heavily criticized because there were massive flaws. The 1619 Project claimed that the Civil War was fought to preserve slavery. It claimed that 1619 was the founding of the country, not 1776. It claimed that the founding ideals were, quote, false when they were written. Many people rejected as historians, but the New York Times just ignored it. They just dismissed these criticisms. And so we felt it was important that a group of black leaders, black scholars, and said, look, if you're saying these things about the black community, then recognize you don't speak for all of us. That there are millions and millions of black people, African Americans, past and present, who've embraced the ideals of our country, who've embraced the ideals of strong families, entrepreneurship, faith, free enterprise. These are the pathways to prosperity. And so the 1776 Unites Project was created really just around a series of essays to say there is another alternative, there's a different view. And so that was founded in February, but then it became clear that the 1619 Project, they weren't satisfied with just a series of essays. They decided to create a curriculum to be distributed in schools across the country, espousing the same idea that America was not founded as a democracy. In fact, America is a slaveocracy, that anti-black racism is embedded in the DNA of the country. DNA is an immutable characteristic. It's all following this theology of critical race theory. And when we saw that this curriculum, the 1619 Project curriculum, was being adopted in schools across the country, Chicago, Newark, places with some of the lowest performing academic outcomes in the country, we realize that this is dangerous. The last thing kids, particularly kids in low-income communities, need to hear is that their country is determined to ensure their destruction. And so,
Ian Rowe, I apologize for interrupting. I could listen to you lecture for an hour or longer, and I hope to do that on a show upcoming very, very soon. But we do have to take our hard break here on the Dennis Prager Show. Bob Crane sitting in for Dennis. Yeah, please do.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
If you want to check this out, there's Anderson Cooper. They're going to a break, and they go to a wide shot, and the segment is over. They're 6 or 8, 10 feet apart, whatever they are, and then they go to a break, and then they immediately go right to each other, and Biden leans in and is whispering in Anderson Cooper's ear. Let's play this video.
We're going
if you're watching.
to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more questions from our audience for former Vice President Joe Biden. Thanks.
There they are. They go this big wide shot. They're both scanning each other. Biden and Cooper start going toward, and there it is. Joe Biden literally leaning into Joe Biden's ear and whispering in his ear. Now, again, not trying to be a jerk here, not trying to be the male version of Karen. They're not socially distancing. Why don't they social distance? Oh, you mean maybe they thought the cameras were off? So they're like in different zip codes when they're on camera, but when they think they're in a break, Biden literally walks up and they both lean into each other, and there's Joe Biden whispering in Anderson Cooper's ear. What do you make of that? What do you make of that? 1-800-655-MIKE. I'm serious. Tell me a little bit about what goes through your mind when you see that what appears to be a crack in the armor of those who are convinced that you better slap a mask on, you better stay home, you better not go out, you better not live your life. This is like Crazyville.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Another one. But I have to read to you from the competition across town, the Washington Post yesterday. Quote, two recent polls show Biden and Trump running about even among Latino voters in Florida, while Clinton outpaced Trump by 27 points with the group 4 years ago. Now, that's the Washington Post citing two polls. Then they said Democratic Party officials are worried about Latino votes in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. This may be the story no one was aware of until this week, and all of a sudden the president shows up in Nevada, does Latino roundtable in Nevada, in Arizona, and in California. David, I think we're on to something here.
Well, look, the president's competing hard for the Latino vote. I wrote about this maybe 10 days ago. They've been sort of enmeshed in these communities for a long time. I think to properly understand the competition for these votes is to understand that not all Latinos or Hispanics are the same. Out west, you've got Hispanics, Latinos of Mexican descent, and they're going to be more liberal than Americans of Cuban descent. And I spent some time in South Florida in 2019 talking to Cuban Americans. And, the president, from a policy perspective and a personality perspective, is a really good fit for the Cuban American vote. They kind of look at him as somebody who walks and talks like they do. Where the president is going to have a challenge is the increasingly large, and it is already large, population of Americans from Puerto Rico and Americans of Puerto Rican descent around Orlando.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
All right, 33 minutes past the hour, leaving us 27 minutes before the top of the hour. My name is Bob France, sitting in for Dennis on the Dennis Prager Show, live from the Pain-Free Relief Factor studios, relieffactor.com studios. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. Our attention is, however, on Louisville, Kentucky, and we are monitoring the podium where we are expecting the Attorney General any moment, really, Daniel Cameron in the state of Kentucky, to speak to the charges that may be handed down by the grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case. Now, if you were listening with us just about 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago now, we did get a judge making an announcement. I think it was the judge. Again, I'm doing this by audio. I don't have visual of her right now, but we are monitoring it. But I believe it was a judge who announced 3 charges against one of the officers, Brett Hankison. Brett Hankison was one of 3 officers who fired shots into the apartment, blindly appears, during that no-knock warrant gone bad in March at Breonna Taylor's apartment. 3 officers fired shots, according to officials. One of them was Hankison. The other two were Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly and also Officer Miles Cosgrove. Now, of the 3, only Hankison was fired from the department. Hankison was fired by Chief Robert Schroeder, who said he was, quote, "I find your conduct a shock to the conscience. He wrote this in a letter to Hankison, and said, "I am alarmed and stunned you use deadly force in this fashion." Now, mind you, here's what we know. When the officers pounded on the door, and according to neighbors did not identify themselves as police, and I guess according to the law they don't have to, but when they pounded on the door, Kenneth Walker, who was Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, staying over at her house, fired through the door and shot and hit Officer or Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly in the leg, which required surgery. Mattingly and the other 2 officers all 3 returned fire, shooting more than 20 rounds. And again, 8 rounds struck Breonna Taylor and killed her. So only Hankison has been charged. Jefferson Circuit Judge Annie O'Connell was the judge that we heard earlier on in the program in the middle of our interview as the grand jury delivered its report, at least on Hankison, to her. Now, what we don't know is if that's it, if that's the end of the game. 3 officers fired shots, Mattingly had been struck, and Hankison was charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment and something very similar to that in the first degree. Wanton endangerment in the first degree. Correct. So we don't know. Does that mean there will be okay, now we're getting this. Just literally as I get the information, I will give it to you. The other 2 officers, Mattingly and Cosgrove, were not indicted. So the grand jury, if we are hearing this correctly, and I'm waiting for the Attorney General of Kentucky, will carry this live for you. Daniel Cameron, the AG of Kentucky, is supposed to speak really any time. It was supposed to be at 1:30 Eastern Time, 10:30 on the West Coast. Waiting to see if he has anything to add to this, but if we understand it all right now, of the 3 officers, 2 of them were not indicted at all. One of them was indicted only on the charge of wanton endangerment in the first degree, and there are 3 charges of that. How will this play in the city of Louisville? And as importantly, how will this play in cities all across the country? We know that the situation involving George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, played itself out in violence all over America. Not all over, but in many, many large urban centers in America. Portland is still ablaze because of what happened in Minneapolis. Or at least that's what they want you to believe. That's the reason. Of course, a lot of that is orchestrated. We have been following this very clearly. A lot of that is funded. But how will Louisville, Kentucky react to this news? And how will the rest of America's big cities react to this news? I have a feeling the answer to that question is going to be very, very badly. That's how they're going to react. All right, so that's the news as we have it. Louisville, Kentucky in particular. I want to hear from you. You called me and filled up the phone lines at the start of the show. Do it again. If you're in Louisville, one of the 3 officers was indicted, and not for murder or even manslaughter. Your reactions coming up next on the Dennis Prager Show.
Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Another one. But I have to read to you from the competition across town, the Washington Post yesterday. Quote, two recent polls show Biden and Trump running about even among Latino voters in Florida, while Clinton outpaced Trump by 27 points with the group 4 years ago. Now, that's the Washington Post citing two polls. Then they said Democratic Party officials are worried about Latino votes in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. This may be the story no one was aware of until this week, and all of a sudden the president shows up in Nevada, does Latino roundtable in Nevada, in Arizona, and in California. David, I think we're on to something here.
Well, look, the president's competing hard for the Latino vote. I wrote about this maybe 10 days ago. They've been sort of enmeshed in these communities for a long time. I think to properly understand the competition for these votes is to understand that not all Latinos or Hispanics are the same. Out west, you've got Hispanics, Latinos of Mexican descent, and they're going to be more liberal than Americans of Cuban descent. And I spent some time in South Florida in 2019 talking to Cuban Americans. And, the president, from a policy perspective and a personality perspective, is a really good fit for the Cuban American vote. They kind of look at him as somebody who walks and talks like they do. Where the president is going to have a challenge is the increasingly large, and it is already large, population of Americans from Puerto Rico and Americans of Puerto Rican descent around Orlando.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
As I mentioned, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died, 87 years old. CNN is reporting, AP is also reporting it, Fox is also reporting it. She was appointed by Bill Clinton, second woman to be appointed to the court, and been in and out of the hospital for several months. She's made it clear she's not a fan of Donald Trump. Made it pretty clear she was trying to hold on until a Democrat president came along so that she would not be succeeded by someone who'd be nominated as a Republican. It's very unlikely anything's going to happen between now and the election, but it also raises the stake of this election, doesn't it? We're only one vote away from losing the individual right to keep and bear arms, as well as other liberties. But this is a big one. Last time the Supreme Court weighed in on a gun case was the Heller case of a few years ago. It was about whether or not a man had an individual right to keep and bear arms. It was a law in D.C. that said you could not have a firearm in your own home. And a security guard had a firearm. He challenged the law. And the Supreme Court said that he was right, that the Second Amendment gave you an individual right to keep and bear arms, not a right as a member of a collective, but as an individual right. That was just a 5-4 decision. So this is going to really, really shake things up and become another major, major issue.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
One of our guests, a very godly man, said that the situation is so dire that it's not just prayers that are needed, but somebody like the president, an American leader, has to officiate over some
$16 before the top of the hour, a reminder to you, AT&T, $76 a month, Verizon Wireless, $83 a month. That's what the average family of four is saving a month by switching to Pure Talk USA. Same great coverage, fraction of the price. I'm a Pure Talk customer. Why aren't you? Dial pound 250, say the word Dennis Prager for unlimited talk, text, and 2 gigs of data for just $20 a month, plus 50% off your first month. Dial pound 250. And say the word Dennis Prager, Pure Talk USA, simply smarter wireless. Okay, here's what we understand. And if you just turn the program on, my name is Bob France, sitting in for Dennis, live in Cleveland, Ohio. Our attention is all on Louisville, Kentucky right now, as is that of the national news, because the announcement was made just minutes ago by Judge Annie O'Connell in Louisville, Kentucky. A Kentucky grand jury has indicted former Louisville police officer Brett Hankison on 3 counts of first-degree wanton endangerment in the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor. Now, this is going to be very interesting. Keep listening, please. The two other officers involved in the shooting, Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly and Detective Miles Cosgrove, were not indicted at all. A wanton endangerment charge is a Class D felony, carries a penalty of 1 to 5 years. Now, the judge read that the grand jury found that Hankison wantonly shot a gun into 3 apartments. The occupants of those 3 apartments were identified by initials. None of the initials were BT or Breonna Taylor. That means the grand jury did not find that Hankison wantonly fired into her apartment, possibly because a gunshot had been fired from the apartment through the door and hitting one of his fellow officers, the officer that we identified earlier, which was the sergeant, Mattingly. So because they had been fired upon, it was not considered apparently wanton or reckless endangerment to fire back. And at the end of the day, what this means is, and we're going to get an explanation from the Kentucky Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, I'm told maybe within seconds, but the way this looks right now, the officers are going to have all been cleared in the actual shooting into Breonna Taylor's apartment. That one officer being charged with wanton endangerment is only having to do with the other apartments, not the one in which Breonna Taylor was killed. What is that going to do to the crowds that are gathering in Louisville, Kentucky right now when that news is broadcast? I don't know. I have an idea, and I'm going to pray that it's the wrong idea, but I am very, very fearful for the people of Louisville, the businesses of Louisville, and perhaps in other American cities. This grand jury is going to end up, if the information we have that is reported thus far is correct, this grand jury is going to end up clearing all 3 officers in the Breonna Taylor shooting at Breonna Taylor. Let's, not even at her, but striking her. Let's go to the podium now, and I believe it's Attorney General Daniel Cameron. Okay, we're getting the video, but we don't have audio yet. We will let you know. Here we go. Let's do this.
Investigation into the death of Miss Breonna Taylor. Prior to this announcement, I spoke with Miss Palmer, Breonna Taylor's mother, to share with her the results from the grand jury. Many of you in this room know that I had the opportunity last month to meet in person with her and other members of Miss Taylor's family, including Miss Bianca Austin and Miss Janiyah Palmer. I want to once again publicly express my condolences. Every day, this family wakes up to the realization that someone they loved is no longer with them. There's nothing I can offer today to take away the grief and heartache this family is experiencing as a result of losing a child, a niece, a sister, and a friend. What I can provide today are the facts, which my office has worked long and hard to uncover, analyze, and scrutinize since accepting this case in mid-May. I urge everyone listening today to not lose sight of the fact that a life has been lost, a tragedy under any circumstances. The decision before my office as the special prosecutor in this case was not to decide if the loss of Miss Taylor's life was a tragedy. The answer to that question is unequivocally yes. There is no doubt that this is a gut-wrenching, emotional case, and the pain that many people are feeling is understandable. I deeply care about the value and sanctity of human life, It deserves protection. And in this case, a human life was lost. We cannot forget that. My job as the special prosecutor in this case was to put emotions aside and investigate the facts to determine if criminal violations of state law resulted in the loss of Ms. Taylor's life. This included examining the actions of Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly, Detective Brett Hankinson, and Detective Miles Cosgrove, the three officers who fired their weapons in the early morning hours of March 13th. In working with our federal partners on this case, it was determined that while we would share information to advance our respective investigations, we must also maintain some level of separation to ensure the integrity of each investigation. When examining issues regarding potential civil rights violations, we determined that any such violation are better addressed through a federal-led investigation, and issues involving potential criminal acts concerning the shooting are better addressed by a state-led investigation. With this in mind, our investigation focused on the events that took place in Ms. Taylor's apartment on March 13th. In the months since taking this case,
you are listening to live coverage of Attorney General Daniel Cameron in
investigator.
Louisville, Kentucky, talking about the Breonna Taylor grand jury decisions. We'll have more right after this.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
That the 2016 election was the first that we know of, I guess. You had both major party candidates under investigation by the FBI. Now, you might ask yourself, well, gee, the candidates were really bad. Maybe they were all bad people. No, I think what happened was the FBI should not have been involved in politics to the degree that they were. And the book starts out, it's really the road to the Mueller investigation in the first chapter, and it's about James Comey. And in the transition, this is after Donald Trump has won the presidency, in the transition, a lot of his most trusted people around him are strongly urging him to fire James Comey immediately. Rudy Giuliani said, he's going to turn on you. There's something wrong with this guy. And Chris Christie said, he's a loose cannon. And if you keep him after you become president, he'll become your loose cannon. These people were not offended on behalf of Hillary Clinton in the way that Comey handled the Clinton email case. But they thought it was erratic, they thought it was unprofessional, and they thought it would be a prediction of the kind of stuff that would happen if Comey remained FBI director after Trump was president. Trump did not take their advice in what I think everybody could probably say was a mistake. He brought with him to the White House habits that he had used in decades in business. And one of those habits of mine was that he can bring people around. He can win them over. He can talk to them and with the sheer force of his personality, bring them over to his side. And he thought he could do that with Comey. And I think we can all agree that that was a failure.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
How many times a day do you ask yourself, am I going crazy? I had that moment last night when I turned on CNN for about 2 or 3 torturous minutes, and I saw what looked like about 20 or 30 cars pulled up to a stage where CNN was hosting a town hall with Joe Biden. And I'm comparing that to the president's rally in Wisconsin, because I went from CNN and the Biden town hall to the Trump rally in Wisconsin, and I thought, I'm losing my mind. That what they have a drive-in movie theater kind of function, and there's Biden standing like 12 feet away from Anderson Cooper. And then I saw a clip on social media that when they thought they were on a break, Anderson Cooper and Joe Biden immediately got close to each other, and
6
Biden
minutes
leaned
before
in
the
and was
top of the hour, we want to go right back to Daniel Cameron, the Kentucky Attorney General, explaining the grand jury decisions in the Breonna Taylor case.
The scope of our investigation did not include the obtainment of that warrant by LMPD's Criminal Interdiction Division. Federal law enforcement partners are conducting that investigation. Sergeant Mattingly and Detectives Cosgrove and Hankinson had no known involvement in the preceding investigation or obtainment of the search warrant. They were called into duty as extra personnel to effectuate the service of the search warrant. They only had information conveyed to them during their prior briefing. Evidence shows that officers both knocked and announced their presence at the apartment. The officers' statements about their announcement are corroborated by an independent witness who was near in proximity to apartment 4. In other words, the warrant was not served as a no-knock warrant. When officers were unable to get anyone to answer or open the door to apartment 4, the decision was made to breach the door. After breaching the door, Sergeant Mattingly was the first and only officer to enter the residence. Sergeant Mattingly identified 2 individuals standing beside one another at the end of the hall, a male and a female. In his statement, he says that the male was holding a gun, arms extended, in a shooting stance. Sergeant Mattingly saw the man's gun fire, heard a boom, and immediately knew he was shot as a result of feeling heat in his upper thigh. Kenneth Walker fired the shot that hit Sergeant Mattingly, and there is no evidence to support that Sergeant Mattingly was hit by friendly fire from other officers. Mr. Walker admitted that he fired one shot and was the first to shoot. In addition to all the testimony, the ballistics report shows that the round that struck Sergeant Mattingly was fired from a 9mm handgun. The LMPD officers fired 40 caliber handguns. Sergeant Mattingly returned fire down the hallway. Mattingly fired 6 shots. Almost simultaneously, Detective Cosgrove, also in the doorway, shot 16 times. This all took place in a matter of seconds. In total, 6 bullets struck Ms. Taylor. Medical evidence obtained by our team indicates that only 1 shot was fatal. Further medical evidence shows that Ms. Taylor would have died from the fatal shot within a few seconds to 2 minutes after being struck. Detective Hankinson fired his weapon 10 times, including from an outside sliding glass door and through a bedroom window. Some bullets traveled through apartment 4 and into apartment 3.
Okay, we're going to have to break for the top of the hour. Bob Franz sitting in for Dennis Prager as we listen to the Attorney General of the state of Kentucky discuss the grand jury decision in the Breonna Taylor case.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
How many times a day do you ask yourself, am I going crazy? I had that moment last night when I turned on CNN for about 2 or 3 torturous minutes, and I saw what looked like about 20 or 30 cars pulled up to a stage where CNN was hosting a town hall with Joe Biden. And I'm comparing that to the president's rally in Wisconsin, because I went from CNN and the Biden town hall to the Trump rally in Wisconsin, and I thought, I'm losing my mind. That what they have a drive-in movie theater kind of function, and there's Biden standing like 12 feet away from Anderson Cooper. And then I saw a clip on social media that when they thought they were on a break, Anderson Cooper and Joe Biden immediately got close to each other, and Biden leaned in and was whispering something in Anderson Cooper's ear, like they didn't think the cameras were on, so they don't need to socially distance. And there were it was apparently a minor league baseball stadium in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and they had like cars pulled up and people standing in white boxes. They were like on a platform with white tape that you better stand in the box and ask Biden a bunch of softball questions about what a bad guy Donald Trump is. There are moments where you think you're losing your mind, but you're not. I'm here to tell you, you're not crazy. They are, okay? They're nuts. They're nuts.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Donald Trump apparently is upset with the FBI director for suggesting that Russia is, again, meddling in the election in favor of him, in favor of Trump. Media's going crazy over Donald Trump disagreeing with the FBI, Donald Trump disagreeing with what the FBI said about the degree to which the Russians are interfering in the election. The biggest interferer in the election by far are you guys. CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, LA Times, virtually every major big city newspaper, left wing. NPR, left wing. PBS, left wing. Virtually every political science department of every university in this country, big, small, east, west, north, south, public, private, with some exceptions, left wing. Why do you suppose the majority of Democrats believe that Russia interfered with vote tallies, even though there's zero evidence of this? And the answer is, after being given a steady diet that Donald Trump is a racist, Donald Trump is a fascist, Donald Trump is Hitler, Donald Trump is incompetent, Donald Trump is lazy, Donald Trump is a grifter, Donald Trump only ran because he wanted to kill Americans and enrich himself. After you're getting a steady diet of this, you have to say to yourself, how could any rational person go into a voting booth or fill out a mail-in ballot and put this guy's name down? How could anybody do that?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The Democrat Party, as America is still recovering from the largest self-imposed economic shutdown in modern history. Do you know what Nancy's doing with the Democrats? They had a vote yesterday on making sure that certain phrases should not be used to describe the Chinese virus. This is from The Blaze. Chris Pandolfo, the Democrat majority in the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution Thursday night condemning what? The shooting of 2 deputies in Compton, Los Angeles. The $2 billion worth of damage and looting done to America by Democrat voters? No. To condemn the phrase China virus and other terms used to describe COVID-19 as a form of, quote, anti-Asian sentiment. The resolution, introduced by Representative Grace Meng of New York, calls on public officials to condemn and denounce, quote, all forms of anti-Asian sentiment as related to COVID-19. It passed in a mostly party line vote of 243 to 163 with 14 Republicans. Eric, I want the names of those 14 Republicans. We will name and shame them here on America First. 14 Republicans who think it's important to control our use of language.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Cincinnati, Ohio, evidently the other day had thousands of cars in a big Trump parade. I saw with my own eyes over in Madeira Beach, Florida, thousands of boats. They've been in South Carolina, North Carolina. I mean, up there, Hartwell. All these big thousands of people turning out to support President Trump. I kid you not. You got to go online quickly to MikeOnline.com. Click Watch Mike on TV so you can see the video I'm going to play of the Biden car parade. If I told you there were 3 with beeping horns, 3 cars with Biden for president signs on the side, would you believe me? Okay, check it out. MikeOnline.com. This is the thrill, the excitement, the energy of the Biden.
Hour number 3 of the Dennis Prager Show underway now. Thank you so much for being with us. We are all sitting here in some shock and some stunned silence, I think, as we listen to the Attorney General of the state of Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, put the finishing touches on his statement to the press about the grand jury's decision, which was announced just about a half an hour ago, to indict the fired officer in the Breonna Taylor case. The fired officer, Brett Hankerson, has been charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the first degree. They're punishable by up to 5 years in prison per count. The other 2 officers who fired into the home of Breonna Taylor, striking her and killing her, have been cleared, justified in their use of force by the fact that they were fired upon first. Let's go back now to Louisville and listen to the rest of Attorney General Daniel Cameron's statement.
Citizen, instigating violence and destruction are not. I've spoken with both Mayor Fisher and Governor Beshears in the days leading up to this announcement, and I urge them to do what is necessary to maintain law and order and to protect our cities and our people. We have a long road ahead, both as we pursue this case through the criminal system and as we address the pain in the Louisville community. I'm committed to being part of the healing process. When tragedy occurs, we must mourn. We must also do everything we can to prevent it from happening again. Today, consistent with that view, I'm announcing that I will create a task force to review the process for securing, reviewing, and executing search warrants in Kentucky. The task force will consist of a variety of stakeholders, including citizens, members from the law enforcement community, representatives from the judiciary, defense attorneys, and elected leaders. I'll be issuing an executive order in the coming days to create this task force. I believe conducting a top-to-bottom review of the search warrant process is necessary to determine if changes are required and establish best practices. You have my word that I will also vigorously prosecute the criminal charges announced today. I can assure you that my team of prosecutors will continue to give this case their attention and time. We'll also continue to support the good men and women of our law enforcement community who put their lives on the line every day to protect and to serve. And I will fight for those across our state who feel like their voice isn't heard, who feel marginalized, judged, and powerless to bring about change. In a world that is forcing many of us to pick a side, I choose the side of justice. I choose the side of truth. I choose a path that moves the Commonwealth forward and toward healing. You have that choice as well. Let's make it together. Thank you, and God bless. I'll now take some questions.
Okay, we are going to move away from the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron there. We heard almost his entire statement, save for the breaks at the top of the hour. But I want to get your reaction now. Again, I will give deference to Kentucky callers, to Louisville, Kentucky callers, first and foremost. So if you are in Kentucky and you are in Louisville in this in the middle of all of this, dial now. And if you are anywhere in the country with reactions to what you just heard and what we learned today, dial 8 Prager 776. That's 877-243-7776. A couple of quick notes before I go to your phone calls of reaction to what we just heard. I think it's important to note a few things. One, the fact that only one of the three officers was indicted is going to enrage those who are looking to be enraged. Okay? I say that knowing very well that there are already protesters out there on the square in downtown Louisville. They are gathering, and that crowd in its rage, I think it is kind of automatically, there's a default setting to these types of crowds that is on outrage. It would take something extraordinary for them to flip that switch to just moderately annoyed. They're outraged, and they're going to act upon that rage, I am afraid. And it's because only one of the three officers involved was punished in any way. And that officer happens to be the same officer that was fired. Brett Hankerson was fired, and now he is the one charged with the three charges of wanton endangerment in the first degree. The other two face nothing at all. This is going to upset some people. But a few things need to be pointed out. Number one, as Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General, clarified, there were 6 shots that struck Breonna Taylor, not 8, and only one of them was fatal. Only one of them was fatal. And the bullets that were fired into that apartment were justified by the fact that Breonna's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, had fired on the officers first. 2, and this is crucial, regarding the no-knock warrant part of this story. The Attorney General said that his investigators and prosecutors did, and you have to admit, this happened in March. This is now September. They have done 6 months of due diligence in their investigation to find out what happened, knowing that there was a massive movement afoot in this country, particularly involving police officer-involved shootings with African Americans because of the violence we've seen all summer, knowing that the Breonna Taylor case was going to be extraordinarily, important in the minds of many. They did everything that they could, turned over every stone, and determined that the neighbors who said they didn't hear the police identify themselves were either mistaken or were lying. Because the investigations, according to Attorney General Cameron, turned up that the officers did very clearly announce themselves as police before Kenneth Walker shot through the door and hit the officer, requiring surgery, which is why the other 2 officers were indeed justified in firing back inside that home in self-defense. So the officers, Jonathan Mattingly, who was struck, and Miles Cosgrove, completely cleared in the investigation. And the other officer, Hankerson, Brett Hankerson, he was charged only with firing his weapon wantonly and in a dangerous fashion because of 3 bullets that hit other apartments that may or may not have been all listed, because there were 3 or 4 addresses listed on the search warrant. But that it was wanton recklessness and endangerment to fire. So, in other words, none of the 3 are actually being held accountable in the death of Breonna Taylor herself. And then the other part of this that's important to me is what Attorney General Daniel Cameron just said toward the end of his remarks. He said, look, we know there are people who are hurting over this, but criminal justice, the criminal justice system, is not a quest for revenge. The criminal justice system is a quest for truth and a quest for facts. And they spent 6 months getting to all of the above. If you want to change the system in terms of the search warrant process, how one is obtained and how one is served, that is what he is forming a task force to do. So that if you're looking for change in the wake of the tragic death of Breonna Taylor, Daniel Cameron says that he and the mayor and the governor all agree, and we will look for change in the warrant process. But no one was responsible here criminally for the death of Breonna Taylor, because the individual she was with fired a gun at police officers after an announcement that they were police officers, and their returning of fire, catching her in the crossfire, if you will, was terrible and tragic, but not criminal. That's where we are, and I want reactions. If you are in Louisville, Kentucky, we want to hear from you first. 8 Prager 776 877-243-776. We're going to go to Raymond, who is actually in Kentucky, but outside Louisville, joining us now on the Dennis Prager Show. Hello, Raymond. It's Bob France sitting in for Dennis. Go right ahead.
Hello, Bob.
Hello.
I'm an independent truck driver, and I was due to have a load picking up in Louisville, Kentucky this morning. But when I woke up at 5 this morning, I already had a message from my broker. All loads going in and out of Louisville has been canceled. And my wish is that anyone that listens to your show that are fellow truck drivers just avoid the area because they will get stuck in traffic and no loads.
Yeah, that's very important, and I'm glad you brought that out. Thank you, Raymond. And I'll say to any of the big rig drivers who have loads like that, stay away. And quite frankly, if you are in any kind of vehicle, avoid the area if you can do so. You don't want to, first of all, be stuck in traffic simply for the inconvenience of it all. But then again, we have seen terrible things happening to people who are surrounded by crowds blocking traffic. Avoid the area if you can. More coming up on the Dennis Prager Show.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Donald Trump apparently is upset with the FBI director for suggesting that Russia is, again, meddling in the election in favor of him, in favor of Trump. Media's going crazy over Donald Trump disagreeing with the FBI, Donald Trump disagreeing with what the FBI said about the degree to which the Russians are interfering in the election. The biggest interferer in the election by far are you guys. CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, LA Times, virtually every major big city newspaper, left wing, NPR, left wing, PBS, left wing, virtually every political science department of every university in this country, big, small, east, west, north, south, public, private, with some exceptions, left wing. Why do you suppose the majority of Democrats believe that Russia interfered with vote tallies, even though there's zero evidence of this? And the answer is, after being given a steady diet that Donald Trump is a racist, Donald Trump is a fascist, Donald Trump is Hitler, Donald Trump is incompetent, Donald Trump is lazy, Donald Trump is a grifter, Donald Trump only ran because he wanted to kill Americans and enrich himself. After you're getting a steady diet of this, you have to say to yourself, how could any rational person go into a voting booth or fill out a mail-in ballot and put this guy's name down? How could anybody do that?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The Democrat Party, as America is still recovering from the largest self-imposed economic shutdown in modern history. Do you know what Nancy's doing with the Democrats? They had a vote yesterday on making sure that certain phrases should not be used to describe the Chinese virus. This is from The Blaze. Chris Pandolfo, the Democrat majority in the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution Thursday night condemning what? The shooting of 2 deputies in Compton, Los Angeles. The $2 billion worth of damage and looting done to America by Democrat voters? No. To condemn the phrase China virus and other terms used to describe COVID-19 as a form of, quote, anti-Asian sentiment. The resolution, introduced by Representative Grace Meng of New York, calls on public officials to condemn and denounce, quote, all forms of anti-Asian sentiment as related to COVID-19. It passed in a mostly party line vote of 243 to 163 with 14 Republicans. Eric, I want the names of those 14 Republicans. We will name and shame them here on America First. 14 Republicans who think it's important to control our use of language.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Cincinnati, Ohio, evidently the other day had thousands of cars in a big Trump parade. I saw with my own eyes over the Madeira Beach, over in Madeira.
21 minutes past the hour. Bob France sitting in for Dennis Prager here in Cleveland, Ohio at AM 1420 The Answer. We are going to focus a lot of our attention on 970 AM The Answer in Louisville, Kentucky, because that's where the announcement was just made by Attorney General Daniel Cameron. Actually, prior to that, the announcement was made by a judge whose name is Annie O'Connell, who announced that there would be 3 charges against one officer, all for wanton endangerment, none for manslaughter, none for murder. In fact, nothing having to do with Breonna Taylor, that the 3 shots that he fired into other apartments were wanton and reckless in that exchange, and that that had nothing to do with Breonna Taylor's death, and also the fact that the other 2 officers were justified in using lethal force, considering the fact that they had just been shot at first from inside the apartment by Kenneth Walker. Your reaction. By the way, I was just listening to the Attorney General Daniel Cameron taking questions from reporters. And this is just so disgusting and so disturbing. I just want to share with you before I get to your reactions. A reporter asked Attorney General Cameron, do you understand this is not what the black community wanted to hear? Well, first of all, she's asking that of a black man. Daniel Cameron is the first African-American attorney general in the history of the state of Kentucky. Pretty sure he knows about the black community. Second of all, why must it always devolve into race? This black attorney general just spent the better part of 30 minutes explaining the excruciating detail that they went into, the due diligence that they did for 6 months with multiple investigative teams trying to piece together everything that went down there, and coming out with the evidence that they presented to the grand jury with the grand jury's decision. And the first thing is, you know, the black folks are going to be mad, right? He did not prosecute this case or investigate this case for the black community, nor for the white community. He prosecuted it for the legal community, for the criminal justice community, for the Louisville, the Jefferson County, the state of Kentucky community. And the investigation turns up what the investigation turns up. The facts turn up what the facts turn up. And they are not subject to change because one population or part of the population might not like the outcome. You don't sacrifice people to a trial and a prison sentence because a part of the population would be angry if you don't. That's just not how the criminal justice system works, nor should it. I find that very disturbing that would be an actual question for the African-American attorney general who led the team of prosecutors that investigated this entire case. All right, we'll go to Richmond, Virginia now, and this is going to be Silas. You are on the Dennis Prager Show, Silas, and it's Bob France sitting in. Please go right ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm afraid we're going to have to brace ourselves again for another hard weekend. I teach at an inner city school in Virginia, and I'm telling you, there's a perspective that at large the country doesn't know. And basically it comes down to this. There's so many, 80% of African-American kids are raised without a father, and they have a hard time with authority in general. I wrote a book called Mr. Gunderson's Home Economics, which talks about this, and now things are coming to fruition. They can't, when they deal with the police, and even in the classroom as a teacher, following direct instructions even, giving direct instructions to stand up or be quiet, please, or put your hand up, there is a coming against authority altogether. They're uncomfortable with it. And so with the whole thing about defunding the police, coming against the nuclear family, you're going to see more and more reactions heading in that direction because we're not able to appease the anger that they have. But basically, the anger comes from the home life. The anger is not about being oppressed. It comes from a dysfunctional home, not having a father there. It comes from all the issues of surrounding that environment.
Yeah.
And somehow we have to bring a kind of inclusion to address some of those things because we're going to see more and more and more reactionary things.
Silas, let me say a couple of things in response here. I've got to get in. First of all, thank you for teaching in the inner city. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And second of all, every word you just said was right. My friend Larry Elder talks about this on a regular basis. Dennis Prager himself talks about this on a regular basis. That not very long ago, back right at about the time the Civil Rights Act was passed, about 25% of black children were born without a two-parent, outside of a two-parent household. In other words, 75% of them were in a mother and father stable household. And now that has completely reversed itself. Around 75, you said 80%, okay, of African-American kids are being raised without fathers. And again, Larry has talked about this. There are 3 simple ways for you to rise above it all. 3 ways for you to live a happy, successful life, particularly if you're a person of color, but just in general. Number 1, graduate high school. Number 2, get a job. And number 3, get married before you start having children. You follow those 3 simple rules and you are going to be successful. You have a ticket into the middle class and out of the impoverished class. But what you said is right. Without a father in the home, I don't care what color you are, without a father in the home, and in most homes, fathers provide most of the discipline. The heavy hand, in a velvet glove, an iron hand in a velvet glove. It's the father that provides discipline, the authority figure, if you will. And when a child is raised, particularly a young male child, without that authority figure in the home, he has no idea how to respect authority figures outside the home, whether that's a coach, a teacher, a principal, a police officer, and if they get hired, a boss. They have no idea how to handle authority. And so that's when they act out. And that does drive a lot of what you are talking about right now and a lot of the terrible, terrible crime that we see in those inner city communities. It's unfortunate. It's terrible. Before I go to my next call, I'm told we do have the question from the reporter to Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General, about the black community. Go ahead.
Full justice, and what specifically do you plan to do to calm a community that's long been hurting, and do you understand that anger that people might feel?
I certainly understand the pain that has been brought about by the tragic loss of Ms. Taylor. I understand that as a Attorney General who is responsible for.
Yeah, and he goes on to say, and as a black man, I understand that too, but I think he already answered that question before the question was asked when he said, look, criminal justice is not about a quest for revenge. So don't go out there seeking revenge by destroying things or attacking other people. Criminal justice is about a quest for truth and facts, and that's what they spent 6 months gathering, and it's why they came up with the conclusions that they did and that the grand jury reached the decision that they did. Do not go out there and seek revenge because you're upset about something that didn't go your way. I think Daniel Cameron was extraordinarily well-spoken and very passionate and very sincere in his remarks, and I think the real question is the mayor and other leadership of Louisville, Kentucky going to match that? We'll be right back.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Cincinnati, Ohio, evidently the other day had thousands of cars in a big Trump parade. I saw with my own eyes over in Madeira Beach, Florida, thousands of boats. They've been in South Carolina, North Carolina. I mean, up there, Hartwell. All these big thousands of people turning out to support President Trump. I kid you not. You got to go online quickly to MikeOnline.com. Click Watch Mike on TV so you can see the video I'm going to play of the Biden car parade. If I told you there were 3 with people beeping horns, 3 cars with Biden for president signs on the side, would you believe me? Okay, check it out. MikeOnline.com. This is the thrill, the excitement, the energy of the Biden for president campaign. It's one car, somebody in a mask on a convertible waving a flag. Everybody's got masks, of course. Second car, there's Jill waving at the second car, and there's the third car. That's it. 3 cars.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Look, Joe Rogan, got the most listened to podcast in America. Joe Rogan bluntly put it this way yesterday, cut number 17.
I'd also vote for Whoopi Goldberg over Joe Biden. I'd vote for Mike Tyson over Joe Biden. I just don't think it's a good idea to take someone who's struggling with dementia and put him in one of the most stressful positions the world has ever known. I don't know why the Democrats thought it would be a good idea to take someone who's clearly got a problem.
Yeah, this is Joe Rogan. Now, for those of you who don't know who Joe Rogan is, you're probably over 70. Joe Rogan, would someone look up the stats on how far Adam Carolla and Joe Rogan are the most listened to people in America on demand? They have the largest podcast in America. Now, I am one of the top 5 radio talk show hosts in America. We have a different format, right? I give you news, weather, traffic, sports, wherever you are, as well as breaking news. Joe Rogan just talks to you and does the Joe Rogan thing. There's some other great podcasts, Barstool Sports. There's lots of great stuff out there, and people are listening on demand. But I'm not worried. Talk radio is here forever, and I'm glad to welcome new people into the arena. But Joe Rogan is perhaps a little blunt, right? Maybe I'm a little too diplomatic for Joe. I've talked about the former vice president losing not a step, but a lap. Joe Rogan, I don't know that the vice president has dementia. I don't know that. Joe Rogan doesn't know that. All I know is that he's clueless sometimes.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Eric Metaxas Show.
Fast forward to July 24th, 2019. Mueller testifies before the House and the Senate. He has issued his report, failed to find collusion. Democrats are not really willing to accept his verdict and just give up. They still want to impeach the president based on Russia, but they think they'll need a big Watergate-style
experience. Real.
26 minutes before the top of the hour, and as long as you're in the mood to watch things like Prager University videos, let me remind you about the Trump Card movie. You know, November's election is the most consequential since 1860. Stakes are high, battle lines are stark, and that's why I and Dennis and everyone else were so excited to talk to you about Dinesh D'Souza's latest film. It's called Trump Card. It's an expose on the socialism, corruption, and gangsterism that defines the Democrat Party, whether it's the creeping socialism of Joe Biden or the overt socialism of Bernie Sanders. This film reveals what's unique about modern socialism, who's behind it, why it's evil, and how we can work with President Trump to stop it. Go to watchtrumpcard.com. That's watchtrumpcard.com. Pre-order the video on demand and DVD. You do not want to miss this film by Dinesh D'Souza. You can't get it anywhere else other than at that site. Watch it exclusively on demand today at watchtrumpcard.com and order your DVD today at watchtrumpcard.com. We're getting more reactions now as we continue. Bob France sitting in for Dennis Prager. And we're getting reactions from Louisville, Kentucky, and around the country with anybody with a reaction to what was announced today. 3 police officers involved in the Breonna Taylor shooting, none of them charged in the actual death of Breonna Taylor. One of them charged with wanton endangerment in the first degree for 3 bullets fired into other nearby apartments that endangered people. But the officers were declared to be justified in their use of force because Kenneth Walker, the boyfriend of Breonna Taylor, shot through the door first at the officer, striking one of them, hitting him in the leg, which required surgery, and leading to the return fire that ended up killing Breonna Taylor. They declared a state of emergency in Louisville, Kentucky back on Monday, so they knew what was coming and they knew they had to brace. We're told from callers already that they have boarded up buildings in downtown Louisville and sprayed many of them with fire retardant chemicals because they are just expecting the worst. And sadly, they're right to. I wish they weren't. I wish that rather than spraying fire retardant chemicals on buildings, they put a massive police force and National Guard display downtown Louisville. And I hope they do it in every other big city that might think about burning, smashing, assaulting, looting, vandalizing, et cetera, in every other big city in the name of Louisville. I would rather see an overwhelming force to discourage criminal behavior than trying to pick up the pieces after the criminal behavior. Let's go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. D, you are on the Dennis Prager Show. It's Bob France sitting in for Dennis. D, go right ahead.
Every time there's an altercation between law enforcement and a black person, and it don't turn out to the black people advantage, they holler, it's racial racism. Well, there's as much white racism going on in this country as there's black racism.
Well, the sadness about that, D, and I hear your anger and I hear your frustration because I do understand the point, but nobody wants to talk about that fact. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that more than twice as many white Americans are shot, unarmed white Americans are shot by police than African Americans. And people say, well, that doesn't matter because there's 60% Caucasians in America, only 13% of the population is African American, so it's disproportionate. Well, except for the fact that when you consider the amount of violent crime that is committed by each of the races in this country, and then you realize that when you look at the African-American portion of that, which is extraordinarily outsized compared to their 13% of the population, meaning they have far more violent encounters with police, the prediction would be that they would be shot far, 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 far more than they are. But nobody wants to talk about that part of this. They want to set their default setting to outrage and run with it. That's why I call the Democrat Party the PPO, the Party of Perpetual Outrage. Brian is in Cleveland, Ohio on the Dennis Prager Show. Hi, Brian. Go right ahead.
Hey, Bob, like I told your screener, I call you quite often. But, hey, I want to just talk about, the persona of inner city youth, because when you say inner city youth, everybody just perceives that it's a black kid in the ghetto, whatever. Well, I'm white. I'm 45 years old now, but I'm white, and I grew up inner city youth, okay? When I was 4 years old, my mother shot my abusive father right on the front porch of our house. Then my mother lived an abusive life of alcoholism, drug abuse, and yada yada. So she ended up killing herself when I was 13 years old on Super Bowl Sunday, 1989, okay? So,
Brian, what you're saying, and I apologize for cutting you off, but I got to get to a break. What you're saying is what Joe Biden said isn't true when he said poor people are just as smart as white people, or poor kids just as smart as white kids. Right back.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
If you want to check this out, there's Anderson Cooper. They're going to a break, and they go to a wide shot, and the segment is over. They're 6 or 8, 10 feet apart, whatever they are, and then they go to a break, and then they immediately go right to each other, and Biden leans in and is whispering in Anderson Cooper's ear. Let's play this video.
We're going
if you're watching.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more questions from our audience for former Vice President Joe Biden. Thanks.
There they are. They go to this big wide shot. They're both scanning each other. Biden and Cooper start going toward, and there it is. Joe Biden literally leaning into Joe Biden's ear and whispering in his ear. Now, again, not trying to be a jerk here, not trying to be the male version of Karen. They're not socially distancing. Why don't they social distance? Oh, you mean maybe they thought the cameras were off? So they're like in different zip codes when they're on camera, but when they think they're in a break, Biden literally walks up and they both lean into each other, and there's Joe Biden whispering in Anderson Cooper's ear. What do you make of that? What do you make of that? 1-800-655-MIKE. I'm serious. Tell me a little bit about what goes through your mind when you see that what appears to be a crack in the armor of those who are convinced that you better slap a mask on, you better stay home, you better not go out, you better not live your life. This is like Crazyville.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Another one. But I have to read to you from the competition across town, the Washington Post yesterday. Quote, two recent polls show Biden and Trump running about even among Latino voters in Florida, while Clinton outpaced Trump by 27 points with the group 4 years ago. Now, that's the Washington Post citing two polls. Then they said Democratic Party officials are worried about Latino votes in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. This may be the story no one was aware of until this week, and all of a sudden the president shows up in Nevada, does Latino roundtable in Nevada, in Arizona, and in California. David, I think we're on to something here.
Well, look, the president's competing hard for the Latino vote. I wrote about this maybe 10 days ago. They've been sort of enmeshed in these communities for a long time. I think to properly understand the competition for these votes is to understand that not all Latinos or Hispanics are the same. Out west, you've got Hispanics, Latinos of Mexican descent, and they're going to be more liberal than Americans of Cuban descent. And I spent some time in South Florida in 2019 talking to Cuban Americans. And, the president, from a policy perspective and a personality perspective, is a really good fit for the Cuban American vote. They kind of look at him as somebody who walks and talks like they do. Where the president is going to have a challenge is the increasingly large, and it is already large, population of Americans from Puerto Rico and Americans of Puerto Rican descent around Orlando.
Keep up with what's trending.
Got you under my skin. The question is what color is that skin? Because that determines whether or not it's okay to have you there. Bob France sitting in for Dennis Prager. I cannot believe, that question asked by the reporter of Attorney General Daniel Cameron, a black man, and said, you do realize this isn't what the black community wanted to hear. What is that reporter asking? Hey, why didn't you placate the black community by indicting these officers that the evidence did not support indicting anyway? Is that what she was saying here? To placate the black community so that the black community what? Will be satisfied? So that they won't go and destroy houses and businesses and cars, et cetera, et cetera? Is that what she was asking? It's terrible to say, the
And do you understand that anger that people might feel?
I certainly understand the pain that has been brought about by the tragic loss of Ms. Taylor. I understand that as a Attorney General who is responsible for all 120 counties in terms of being the chief legal officer, the chief law enforcement officer. I understand that. I understand that as a black man, how painful this is. And which is why it was so incredibly important for make sure that we did everything we possibly could to uncover every fact. And I know, look, this team,
they spent 6
myself,
months, and that's good. We'll move on. They spent 6 months on this investigation from the Attorney General's office in the state of Kentucky. 6 months. Multiple investigations. Turning over every stone to find out everything that happened to what led to this woman's death. And this was the result as presented to the grand jury, and the grand jury made a decision based upon those investigations. And now what? Now it's time to march. Now it's time to chant. Now it's time to burn. Now it's time to what? And I say that rhetorically because we have been watching it happen all summer long. And the Attorney General, be he black or white, and Daniel Cameron happens to be black, cannot sacrifice a defendant, cannot sacrifice somebody who's being investigated to prison simply to placate part of the community so that they don't riot. Rather, you let the facts take you where they take you, you let the truth take you where it takes you, and then you use the criminal justice system to make sure people follow the law as they express their reactions to it, including their outrage. The First Amendment allows people to assemble in this country, but it says specifically it is your right to peaceably assemble. Peaceably. Not violently, and not with vandalism. We're going to go to Corydon. I hope I'm saying the name correctly. Corydon. It's in Indiana. I know that. And Kim, you're on the Dennis Prager Show. How do you say that city, Kim? Corydon. Oh, just Corydon. Okay, I saw a Y in there and it threw me off. Okay, go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, it's like you say Louisville. It's not Louisville, it's Louisville. You
right
swallow
on.
half of it.
Got it. And I've been doing my best to say Louisville all day long.
Just put marbles in your mouth and you can say Louisville. But anyway, I was going to say, I live across the river basically from Louisville. And it's terrible to see what's going on in that city because I love that city. It's full of culture. I've been to Broadway shows in downtown Louisville. I've gone to clubs in downtown Louisville. I do Museum Row. I went to the Sons of the American Revolution to do school days to educate children and to see what's going on in that city, because I call it a small little city because it's got a country flair to it and it's welcoming, unlike other parts of the country I've been to in large cities. And it's terrible to see what's going on in what I call my city, even though I live across the river a couple counties over in Indiana. It's still my city. I have friends there, and I'm worried to death for them. I have friends that work in downtown Louisville. I'm worried for them.
I would be worried about them, too, if it was my city. But I'll tell you what, Kim, don't just worry about them. Worry about your current city. Worry about, Indianapolis. Worry about big cities in the Midwest. Worry about big cities on the coasts. Worry about the big cities in the South. Worry about them everywhere, because if you think that the reaction to the Breonna Taylor grand jury decision is going to be anything less than what happened with the George Floyd video, I just think we're all deluding ourselves. Be prepared, be on guard, stay away. During one of the breaks, I went onto my Facebook page and I wrote what happened. I said, Kentucky grand jury has indicted one of 3 officers in fatal Breonna Taylor shooting, no murder charge. My last sentence was my most important. Stay out of big cities tonight. I don't care where you are, not just Louisville. Stay out of big cities tonight. Northridge, California. Boric, you're on the Dennis Prager Show. It's Bob France sitting in. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Hello. Well, you can hear my accent. I spent 33 years of my life in a communist country, okay, so I'm scared, okay? I see communism creeping here. Now, watch out for Louisville demonstrations and the looting and destroying of the city. A friend of mine in Minnesota used to have a psychology practice. He retired a few months ago. Once he treated two patients, a young couple with a relationship problem, and their occupation was professional protesters.
I believe that, and I believe they still exist, and I believe there are more and more of them being hired every single day. Boric, I think you're right. And the sad part is you're talking about that from your...
This is first-hand information from the psychologists who treated them. They get paid transportation, paid hotel or motel, and cash on the top of it. So, yes, this is a professional terrorist organization.
And that's why, my friend, and I thank you for the phone call, that is exactly why there are federal investigations being called for right now into the funding of these professional domestic terrorists, these the city destroyers, because they're moving like locusts from one city to another based on where the latest outrage of the day is. That's why they are the PPO, the Party of Perpetual Outrage. And yes, they're very well funded, and I hope the federal investigation gets to the bottom of that funding. We'll be right back.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The Democrat Party, as America is still recovering from the largest self-imposed economic shutdown in modern history. Do you know what Nancy's doing with the Democrats? They had a vote yesterday on making sure that certain phrases should not be used to describe the Chinese virus. This is from The Blaze. Chris Pandolfo. The Democrat majority in the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution Thursday night condemning what? The shooting of two deputies in Compton, Los Angeles. The $2 billion worth of damage and looting done to America by Democrat voters. No. To condemn the phrase China virus and other terms used to describe COVID-19 as a form of, quote, anti-Asian sentiment. The resolution, introduced by Representative Grace Meng of New York, calls on public officials to condemn and denounce, quote, all forms of anti-Asian sentiment as related to COVID-19. It passed in a mostly party line vote of 243 to 163 with 14 Republicans. Eric, I want the names of those 14 Republicans. We will name and shame them here on America First. 14 Republicans who think it's important to control our use of language.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Cincinnati, Ohio, evidently the other day had thousands of cars in a big Trump parade. I saw with my own eyes over in Madeira Beach, Florida, thousands of boats. They've been in South Carolina, North Carolina, up there, Hartwell. All these big thousands of people turning out to support President Trump. I kid you not. You got to go online quickly to MikeOnline.com. Click Watch Mike on TV so you can see the video I'm going to play of the Biden car parade. If I told you there were 3 with beeping horns, 3 cars with Biden for president signs on the side, would you believe me? Okay, check it out. MikeOnline.com. This is the this is the thrill, the excitement, the energy of the Biden
Although if you click on Town Hall TV during this broadcast, you will not get the beautiful visage of Dennis Prager. You will be subjected to whatever you see right now. Bob France filling in for Dennis, wrapping it up here. I've got time for maybe one or two more quick calls, but before I do that, if I may depart from the Breonna Taylor reaction story, to tell you that Governor Gavin Newsom in the state of California, this is a real headline. California governor signs executive order to ban gas-powered cars and trucks by the year 2035. Banning gas-powered cars and trucks. What I want to know is how big is the electric battery going to need to be to power hundreds of thousands of 18-wheelers that travel to and from California every single day, moving America's goods from one place to another. I prefer the Dream Police. They rattle my head. Okay, let's go to Bradenton, Florida. This is Al. You're on the Dennis Prager Show. Al, it's Bob France sitting in. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, Bob. I've heard you many times on the radio, and I'm quite honored to have a moment to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
I know you have a lot of guests, so I'm going to try to talk fast.
Yes, sir.
And forgive me if there's a little background noise.
No, you sound fine. You sound fine. Go right ahead.
Dogs and cats that listen to your show somehow keeps them quiet. But I was struck listening to that reporter who asked that incredibly stupid question and revealed her colossal ignorance of the American process of justice. And what really struck me on thinking about it was the contrast between this process that was described by Daniel Cameron on the radio and Hillary Clinton's process a couple years ago. In this process, you had a grand jury, which was commissioned by the state, utterly independent from the state attorney's office, that did a careful and thorough examination over a period of many months, knowing the whole country was going to be hanging on every word of their conclusion, gave their recommendations to the state attorney, who made a fair determination based on the evidence of whether to file a charge against whom and for what. Compare that to the process.
I'll tell you what, Al, I've got to jump in here because we're short on time, but I want to tell you something. That was a great summary. You missed your calling. You should work in radio news. You really did. That was a great summary of what happened there. And I wish I had more time to talk to you, but we are out of time. And I want to say thank you to the crew. Thank you to Dennis for letting me sit in on his great show today and letting me talk to this phenomenal audience. We'll talk to you the next time on the Dennis Prager Show.